Hello, everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Jams and Tea Podcast, where we spin the jams and spill the tea. And we're sorry we missed you last week. It was a tough week. It's been a tough couple of weeks for Jen and myself, but we are no stranger to sandwiching a bunch of different reviews into new episodes and doing a bit of a
You're getting a real smorgasbord from us this episode.
oh,
And
we're running the entire gamut of different kinds of releases today because we're going to be talking on the docket today. We're going to be talking about, of course, the new album from one Miss Charles Xavier XCX herself, Charli XCX, talking about her new record, music, fashion, and film. And we're also going to be talking about the latest album from alt metal rising stars Loathe, their new album, A Stranger to You. But we're also going to be talking about the latest from the Menzingers, a band that we have done a discography breakdown of on the past. And we also covered their most recent record on the show. And now we're talking about their new record. And we're going to be talking about the latest album from Steve Lacey, former Odd Future affiliate turned pop star. So, let's dive into probably the biggest release here, and by probably I mean definitely, and that would be Charli XCX's music, fashion, and film. And it's so strange to come here and talk about Charli XCX because the first episode of this podcast we ever did was about Charli XCX's How I'm Feeling Now. And thus, we have followed her 2020s career very, very closely. Riley was a big fan. I was getting into her music around the time the Charli album came out, and I had been listening to some of her older stuff, and I was like, yeah, okay, I'm kind of into this stuff. And then How I'm Feeling Now came out, which was like a genuine COVID sort of super hit. And it ended up being one of the best pop albums that was released that year. I still think that. I still think that that album is fantastic. If I'm honest, that's probably her best to me. And then we followed where she went after that. And Charli XCX has been in the wilderness in the 2020s. And I know that's a strange thing to say in a post-Brat world, but we tend to forget the entire rollout of things like Crash, for instance, which is an album that I wasn't really super into, and well, nobody else really was super into that either. But we've been following her, and she has been one of the most fascinating pop stars to follow in these last couple of years, just because she is deeply unpredictable and also very, very unique. Brat was kind of a foundation shifting pop album, one that we didn't get to cover because it was on our hiatus, but it was an album that really hit critical mass, not with me personally. It's just sort of a record that I have lots of weird, stupid, complicated thoughts on that kind of keep me at an arm's length from it. But, I still see the vision, I understand. But in a post-Brat world, we're already seeing the influence of that record on other albums that we've even talked about this year. And so that kind of begs the question, what's Charli going to do? She's always been a boundary pusher, an envelope pusher. And so you just got to wonder what's left in the tank, you know? Like, not to say that she's slowing down or anything, but like, where does a pop star even go after you've conquered this many different subgenres and sounds and all of this kind of stuff? And the answer is making a weird post-punk album, kind of. Music, fashion, and film, honestly, like I listened to rock music, the single when it came out, and I was just kind of like, this kind of feels like we're fucking around. Like I don't really have many thoughts on this as music. It's just sort of a tone setter, what it feels like, if it's even gonna be on an album, and it is on an album. It's the intro track here. And I was like, this doesn't really give me an idea what this album is gonna end up being. And instead, we've got this 30-minute record that features fucking David Cronenberg and Martin Scorsese on the front of it because,
well,
that's
no, that's Martin Scorsese, and Mark Jacobs
or
and
yeah, my bad. Forgot
John
David
Cage.
Cronenberg's on the song. Oops, getting my old men confused. But what we have here is, I think the best way to say it is that I think this is Charli XCX trying to make a Velvet Underground album where she's Nico. And that's kind of my byline for it. It's strange in the same way that lots of early Velvet Underground albums are. It's kind of got some moments that are a bit amusical on it, but it does still have some pop preoccupations that, Charlie does lean into. But I'm going to confess right off the bat, I don't get this album. I have tried. I really, really have. And this is something that I actually feel very ashamed of admitting because it's not something that I do often because I try to understand or have an angle on everything. And coming at this, I kept listening to it and it's just very stiff. It's very dry. And I know that it's supposed to be stiff and dry, but it's just not clicking for me because I'm gonna have a really dumb complaint, and I mean a really dumb one, and it's probably gonna piss people off.
Oh no.
Maybe I've just been doing this too long. Maybe my expectations are unrealistic here, but can pop stars start talking about things that aren't being pop stars? I'm a little sick of it, honestly. I'm kind of done with it. Like the whole meta-referential self-commentary, excoriating yourself and like trying like I know that there are differences when Charlie does it from album to album, and I know that that is charting her progress as a person and that she's the type of person who does lay into this kind of thing, so it's not coming from a dishonest place. I'm just so bored with it. And it's not this album's fault or Charli XCX's fault necessarily. It's just that when you have this deliberately, intentionally kind of album that obfuscates itself, when Charlie is like taking pages out of the Falls playbook, for fuck's sake, I'm just kind of at a loss as to where our center is. I don't really have footing with this album. So Jen, please, I don't really know beyond your feelings on Brat. I don't know where you land with Charlie, and I don't know where you land with this album, but like there are moments on here I like. It just never congealed into something where I was like, I understand what we're doing here now. It was just kind of like, yeah, this is a lot of ideas and it's a lot more interesting. I'm going to take a page out of Pitchfork writer and friend of the show Hannah Jocelyn's review and say that this is an album that is much more interesting to think about than it is to listen to.
So, like you, I listened to the song Rock Music when it came out. And I should preface this by saying that my biggest issue with the original version of Brat is that I said it this way and you repeated it somewhere else. So I'm just going to
Hmm.
say it again. It's an album that breaks kayfabe one too many times.
Hmm.
And when Brat breaks kayfabe, it does so in a way that's thin and limp to the point of being too marginal to affect the big swing verve moments that that album has. And so I became more endeared to Brat as a cultural object with the arrival of the remix album, which
Yeah, me
laces
too.
in a lot more unkempt moments of real insecurity on display with the grooves and the vocal melodies and the instrumentation to really back that stuff up. Like the biggest improvement between these two versions of that album is the take on I Might Say Something Stupid that the
Yeah,
1975 bring to the table with that remix in particular, because that song is the weakest point on the original album to me. And on the
yeah,
remix album, it's for me the key to understanding the entire thing.
yeah,
It's unbelievable how drastically my understanding of Charlie XCX's work changed just in the time that I spent analyzing the two different versions of that one song.
yeah,
And what I get out of music, fashion, and film is a whole album of, I might say something stupid, remixes. And
yeah,
what this album brings to the table is a mix of songs that are either so obviously misshapen
hmm,
or unignorably melancholic that the secret jadedness of Brat is now on full display. And when I was listening to rock music for the first time and I got to that line, I think the dance floor is dead, was causing some drama, some controversy because she was like because people, just take that at face value and say, "Really? Like, do you really think that dance music is over now that you're done making Brat?" And she's like, "No, no."
That is some serious like internet comment. I like pancakes, so you hate waffles type shit. Like, are we still
Yeah.
doing
It
that?
was it was a real pancakes and waffles moment. And whereas I understood it to mean like, oh, Brat is over.
Yeah.
We're done with the big flashy image stuff. This is Charlie trying to once again, as she's done at several points in her career, kind of take a sledgehammer to her own image.
Mm.
And she's done this in ways all throughout her career, ways that have frankly come across as immature is the word that I'm going to use to describe it. And it makes sense considering Charlie's age when she was doing those sorts of things, dissing her biggest hits, putting out albums and then shitting on them, seemingly intentionally wandering into very plastic sheen projects that she would then immediately dismiss with whatever the follow-up to it would be.
Hmm.
Like the whole Crash era is kind of her Let's Dance, where it's a testament to how
Yeah.
well she can attempt to sell out.
I no, I completely agree with like Crash in hindsight is kind of like it's the album I forget exists the most that simultaneously I feel like understands who she is or allows me anyway to understand what kind of artist she is because the problem I have with Crash and to a lesser extent this album as well is that she is so very aware of her pop star image and the pop star narrative. She's so tapped into that it does feel like she occasionally forces an element of the pop star narrative onto herself, but without the chutzpah to actually go through with it. Like Crash is an attempt to force a disaster album. That is an attempt to manufacture the narrative that she is completely discombobulated and frazzled, but the problem is that album doesn't really sound like that. It's just sort of that. And then this to me feels like, okay, we are gaining back the narrative somewhat from Brat, which is kind of relinquishing herself a little bit because she's talking about herself in the context of modern pop music and all of these different artists who she's friends with or not friends with. And you're creating like this almost social climate within an album. This is taking her away from that but still examining the effects of what that has on somebody as she becomes older, more jaded, and, well, on this album, more preoccupied with things like, well, dying.
And I want to hone in on something that you just said, which is that Charlie fails to produce the chutzpah. This
Yeah.
is an album about being unable to produce the chutzpah in many
Yeah.
respects. And in a way, that's what I think makes it so lyrically compelling. Like looking back on it, hearing it in the context of the album, rock music to me is just, it's hilarious.
I mean,
I
it is
love
funny.
how structurally unkempt this song is, despite how perfect the first verse is at portraying this kind of washed up, insecure party animal. The whole line about, and then we kiss each other, it's real incestuous vibes, and then she just mutters, I figured you'd like that part. Like that to me, what I think I'm really resonating with on this album is the idea that this is an intentional attempt to kind of strip back the
Hmm.
self in a way that Brat is a kind of an attempt at a coexistence between the pop star image and the real person underneath it. This is what's the word I'm looking for? This is the id trying to break free after it's been suppressed by the ego, not to skip ahead to the end of the album, but like don't fucking choke on your ego is a really good moment of clarity that this album has that's helped me really understand what it's trying to do here. Because by the time you get to songs like Card Declined and Camera, Card Declined is this really impressionistic and surreal portrayal of just trying to immerse yourself in materialist platitudes, having the things and being able to get all the nice things as a way to prove that you've sort of got yourself together. But then you just constantly have that refrain of card declined. Something has got to give or has already given way, and there's more work that needs to be done before you can move on to the next step. Is there a comment that needs to be
No,
shared? Okay.
the, the, if you're regular viewer of our channel, I just want you to tuck this corner of me laughing randomly in this one video into the back of your mind and wait about a couple of weeks. You'll find out what I'm laughing at then.
Foreshadowing. Anyway. And then Camera. I love this
Camera's
song so
amazing.
much.
I love this song. It's great.
I know this is your highlight because I was looking at your little rate your music
Mhm.
chart for this record. But this one is the one where it kind of plays its hand at its most forward of what the album is trying to be. The idea that Charlie is examining her own like want to perform for the camera because performance fulfills something for her, but
Yes.
something about the way that she's currently performing is not working. It's confessional, and it's also revealing this kind of discontent with the apparatus that she's admitting to having built for herself. And I don't know, man. I was watching Professor Sky's video about this, connecting it to the movie Persona, and doing a very thorough analysis of this album as basically an adaptation of the movie Persona, where Charlie's playing both characters. Um,
Huh.
but I'm gonna go there because I can't believe that I have the opportunity. This is some real opening night shit that we've got going on here.
You know what? Yeah. Yeah, you're right. I'm kind of disappointed I didn't make that little connection myself.
So if you didn't watch our last episode of Jen and Jake's Bizarre Fray, Opening Night's a movie directed by John Cassavetes starring his wife, Jenna Rollins, as an actress who is dealing with the plight of aging. And not just aging, but aging and feeling disconnected from the meaning-making rituals that have governed so much of your life. For the character in the movie Opening Night, it's about being an actress on stage. And so throughout the whole movie, you're seeing this actress dealing with the constraints that this new play that she's in is kind of putting on her psyche, and the way that the act of acting allows her to present some part of herself that she feels like she can't express any other way. But the play itself does not allow her to express what she wants to express. The play Brat does not allow Charli XCX to express what she wants to express anymore. So we have to move on. We have to do something different. Myrtle Gordon has to start riffing, and Charli XCX has to start shit posting again. Because if there's anything that Charli XCX is good at, it's shit posting.
That has always been true, by the way. I mean, that's just, she has always been, to some extent, a provocateur. And I feel like this album is certainly an extension of that because, again, as I implied, Charlie is very cognizant of the pop star narrative and the pop star image. She knows what releasing an album like this is going to look like to people who don't, like, get it. You know, for the people who aren't us, for the people who are just here for the bops, this is going to be a deeply alienating experience, even if you have a song like Camera or like another single ready-ish song on here. Like towards the end, we have my other favorite song on here, which is Magic Metal Montana, which kind of feels like a more traditional Charlie-esque song, but kind of like with this album's sound font, as it were. And I think that from an outside looking in perspective, I stumbled into what I think about this album when I started introducing it, I think, because I said, "Where does Charlie go from here?" And then I take a look at this album and it's like, "Oh, this is the answer to that question because I mean like, yeah, realistically, what do you do? What do you adopt? How like you have to grow horizontally a little bit and make some weird fuck ass album that is about unspooling your complicated thoughts about the fact that your last record was this like really deeply confessional thing that was like you at your absolute most vulnerable you've ever been, and it was the biggest thing you will ever make, and nothing will probably ever come close to that. And she's also, she's been in the conversation since then. She did the soundtrack to Wuthering Heights. She had that movie come out that was about her a couple of months ago that I didn't see. Oops, sorry. It was not playing near me because duh. But there is a lot of the pageantry and the style of this album that is deliberately disarming that I understand the purpose and intention of. I think really it just comes down to execution when this album just in its attempt to strip things back, it just makes itself a little bit sonically less compelling to me. This album sounds like a 1975 album. Like way more than anything she's ever made. And I mean, duh. Her husband's the drummer from the band. And I mean, like, she's even commenting on the fact on the record that, she's a wife now. And like trying to inhabit this mantle is weird for her because every label she's ever been given and adopted has been one that has pigeonholed her, one that she has held at a distance, one that she's felt weird about. So naturally, that is going to extend over to her being a wife. The problem I have is that that's it. That's all I get from that. And I want more because that's something I find interesting. Like the opening night-esque part of it, where she's aging and she's having to deal with the fact that she is not the person who made Charlie in 2019 anymore. That I want a little bit more of. That towards the end of this album, when we get that speech from fucking Mr. David Cronenberg himself, I I may not be locked in musically, but I am locked in emotionally on occasion. I just wish that the two were in concert a little bit more often because this album just musically, I can't really see myself coming back to it just to listen to it. And it's not because it doesn't have the hits. I don't really care about that. I'm just saying as songs, some of these are just kind of lacking.
And where I think I'm more positive on this than you are is that in the album's brevity, it's able to communicate really well these feelings of stagnation in the lyrics without any of the instrumentation becoming so, to use a very critical phrase, to become so overwhelmingly boring that the album becomes impossible to tolerate. Like, I can really see how the consistency that these guitars and drums are handled can really turn off a person that's just not here to hear Charlie over production like this.
Yeah.
But for me, it works because I enjoy the lo-fi approach. I enjoy the fuzzy guitars and the kind of lo-fi underplayed drums on a lot of this. And there's some moments of real instrumental flair, like the big ominous strings on I'm Afraid that can inject a little bit of juice into this. But I can see how people might not be able to approach this as eagerly. But for me, I don't know, man. I got into Nine Inch Nails this year. This is kind of working on me. I I
Hey,
enjoy the abrasiveness of it and I enjoy the monotony of it a little bit because that's for me contributing to what the album is about. And getting to this moment of real ego death at the end on No One Lasts Forever, I've just found it like eerily, hauntingly, like following me around this week. I've just
the
had
the
like
repetition of that final line over and over again, I will say that's an effective moment. Like I that really sold me on what this album ended up being about in the end.
the whole third act of this album has a lot more clarity than the first
Yes,
two do,
and I
which I think
prefer it for
also
that
really
reason.
helps it because from Wink Wink to No One Lasts Forever, you're
Yep.
getting really strong song conceits and lyrical ideas. Whereas up until that point, you might have songs like 2007 and especially Yeah, which can be a little bit impenetrable if you're not willing to read between the lines a little bit. And in a way that can be frustrating because songs like Yeah just kind of purposefully don't deliver.
Yeah.
But for me, it's communicating something still, and I'm a little bit more on the playful anti-art wavelength that this album has, where I get a laugh out of the way that she says yeah with this resignation that for one it comes across like a shit post, but for two speaks to some extent to the song's themes of addiction and the reluctant resignation to the old patterns. Like I see the big brain element of what this album is, but I can tell where our impasse is is that I can also get onto the what's the word I'm looking for? I can also get into the low art enjoyment of this where I'm just like, yeah, the guitar riffs knock. I just think they do, and you might not think that they do.
That's, and I had a moment here where I just looked at the credits to the album and I was like kind of semi-joking when I was just like, this is Charlie making a Velvet Underground album. And then I was just like, John Cale's on the fucking cover. I'm an idiot. Of course that's what she's doing. Duh. She got a member of the fucking band. This is why you need to do your research, kids. It's been a long fucking week. That being said, that is kind of true. It's like, again, as a fan of the music of the Velvet Underground, if you're gonna do this, you gotta take it to 10 for me. If you don't make an album that sounds either as pretty as the self-titled or as nasty as something like White Heat, then you're in an aesthetic middle ground that doesn't wholly work for me, especially when you are so steadfastly still committing to some of your instincts, like on songs like Camera. It feels like she might be spreading herself too thin, but that's also like the point. I get that that's like there is a resignation and a just sort of stymied enthusiasm on here that I, from a distance, understand why it's compelling because this is not like another Charlie album. That was Crash's biggest issue is that at its best moments, it's like, yeah, these sounds like songs from other Charlie records. Like this sounds like it could be from here, this sounds like it could be from here, yada yada. There is unmistakably nothing on here that could fit on another album of hers. Even Camera is not going to fit on Brat, How I'm Feeling Now, Crash, any of those albums. Like, even her earlier stuff is such a far cry from this, it's absolutely impossible. So, I'm glad that she's taking risks, but I guess now that we've kind of arrived at this sort of pivotal moment where Charlie is reflecting on how far she's come and just doing this last resort sound of just like, this is what I got to do next. It makes me a lot more eager to see what that next move is going to be. I hope that maybe the saturation of how much she has been in the headlines and been making waves recently, maybe, she got married, maybe she'll dip out for maybe like a year and a half, maybe ish. Then I'm a little bit more interested to see. I feel like Charlie needs, well, I mean, at the risk of sounding like her fucking therapist, maybe you need a little time away from that Camera that you talked about on this album. Maybe you need to step back and maybe we need to do some personal growth just so we can come at some new material from a new angle of some kind. Like, go live your life a little bit, miss. Like, we will be fine. We'll live. Some of us will. A lot of my gay friends probably won't, but, you know, they'll find
think
something else.
my kind of final note on this is going to be that this album made me feel like I understood a little bit more of what's going on under the hood with Charlie XCX's whole bit. Because
Hmm.
even in the moments where I'm not always as into what the album is doing, I see that it's trying. And that's this album's biggest virtue,
Hmm.
is that even when it seems like it's playing in your face, there's more to it than that.
I
And it
wouldn't
comes
call it low effort like some are. I
yeah,
think
and
that's ridiculous.
it comes across pretty clearly in its construction that like for me the placement of songs like Yeah in 2007, which are kind of sandwiched in between these moments of big confession, really get at what this album is going for, which is that even though I'm figuring out so much about me that still needs to change, I'm still some of this some of these old troubles still have their hooks in me. And I find that interesting as a concept. And ultimately, on No One Lasts Forever being the ending of this, I find the definitional nihilism of it to be a very interesting point of resolution that I've just spent the whole like week thinking about that
Mhm.
really like not all of my thoughts about it are even appropriate to say in the context of the album because it goes way beyond that. But I like that Charlie is able to think of herself as an artist in the process of change. And a lot of moments on this album really resonate with me as somebody whose creative drive has at times been the only thing that has like kept them going.
Oh yeah. No, I completely get it. And honestly, this album passes the threshold for me to say that I still recommend you listen to it on basis of the fact that I don't really know how any given person is going to react to this. So therefore, I kind of, and not to mention, it's 30 minutes long. I kind of think you owe it to yourself if you're even a little bit interested just to see what this is, just because if you do dig it, you're probably gonna like find a gateway into a lot of other music like it that maybe you didn't listen to before. Because again, those, those post-punk comparisons that I threw out there, they're not that far from this. So, I would take this, I would take a listen to this, even if you really weren't somebody who was into Brat or even the Brat Remix album, because again, this is a pretty far cry from those things. So, tentative recommendation for me. I don't dislike this album. I just kind of struggle to have thoughts about it, really.
I recommend this album very
Listen to Jim.
thoroughly.
There you go. So let's move into something that's a little bit more comfortably in my wheelhouse, and let's talk about the Menzingers real quick. The Menzingers are one of the bands that I most commonly associate with my friend group, just because it was like Morgan was really into them when I met Morgan, and then I became super into them in late high school, and then once I made all of my friends, we just basically made everyone we knew a fan of this band. And we did the discography breakdown on these records. And, we have albums like On the Impossible Past, which is easily one of the most underrated punk records of the 2010s. An absolute just tour de force of phenomenal mixtures of punk, pop punk, and heartland rock. And their catalog is stunning, honestly. Chamberlain Waits, On the Impossible Past, Rented World, After the Party, Hello Exile. I love all of these albums. I hold them very, very dearly close to my heart, and a lot of them have soundtracked just so many moments and instances in my life. We reviewed Some of It Was True when it came out in 2023, and that was an interesting moment for the band because they really, really played into the heartland rock aspect of their sound way more than they ever have, to the point where they just sounded like pop punk Bruce Springsteen a couple of times. And it was great. It was a really solid effort. Maybe not one of the band's best by any means, but coming off the back of Hello Exile, which is an album that I really love the songs of, but the production of which is very, you take a listen to it and it kind of sounds like it's actually being recorded in a bar, which I like, but most people do not. And I get why, just because the bite of this band's sound is essential. Like we have producer on this album, Will Yip, who of course, always fucking brings it. An absolute, again, indie rock producer to the stars. Doesn't ever put a foot wrong with me anyway. And so Some of It Was True had some awesome highlights on it, some songs that I still return to every once in a while. But now we have Everything I Ever Saw this year. And this is a premier slice of jams and tea comfort food. This is the exact kind of music that we traffic in, of guys who are a little bit over the hill, talking about the fact that they're a little bit over the hill in a sound that is unique, but still like works as a kind of broad version of itself. Like if you don't like Heartland rock, you still might really fucking like the Menzingers, no matter what era that they're cribbing from. And on this album, we see them doing a lot of what they normally do with a new album. I think it's fair to say that the Menzingers have arrived at that point in their career where their albums are starting to lose a little bit of distinct identity as they come out, but they are so foundationally solid as a band and as songwriters with their two sort of split vocal personalities and writers, and just they're so good at what they do that they keep themselves aloft no matter what. Everything I Ever Saw is, in my opinion, probably the weakest album this band has ever put out, and it's pretty good. I really like it. It's a very, very solid effort with lots of commendable moments on it, and maybe the sound of it doesn't have quite the personality that basically any other Menzo's album does have, in my opinion. But I think the performances, the songwriting, a lot of it is held aloft, especially because there are songs on here like the absolutely superlative Gasoline and Matches, which is a song that
Oof,
is
yes.
basic. I needed to hear this song so bad this year because it is a song where the Menzingers take you by the shoulders and say, "Stop fucking catastrophizing about everything that happens to you and just calm down." And it sounds like that might be a bit blunt of a sentiment, but these guys are really great at taking blunt sentiments and weaving the poeticism out of them. And Gasoline and Matches is just one of those moments where all the stars align and we have a classic Menzinger song conceit and a classic hook. Everything about it just kind of works. And generally speaking, it is a very topical album. They've never really shied away from being more political, but this is a record where, one of the songs will directly actually talk about MAGA flags being flown in specific cities and what have you. So it's a little bit more contemporary, a little bit more of the moment than maybe we're used to. But in some respects, this is window dressing just because I wouldn't say that this album is about those things. It's just kind of what Menzinger's albums are always about, with that as kind of context informing this sort of new turn that they've got here. And that's far from the only highlight on here. I think Chance Encounters, the opener here, is phenomenal. I think Romanticism is also phenomenal. Breathe With Me, great song. There are moments on here where I'm a little bit less with it just because the songwriting feels just a little too vague, which that is kind of a problem with these guys is that you go listen to On the Impossible Past, that is not a vaguely written album. You feel the sharpness of every lyric. But some songs on here feel like they deal in generalities a little bit too much for my liking. This is good, it's solid, I enjoy it, but I would never recommend that anyone not already familiar with this band start with this album. So, Jen, how'd you like starting off with this album?
Okay, how did it feel to go into this album? Okay.
Yeah.
How did it feel to go into this album as somebody that's never listened to this band before? Not gonna lie, pretty great.
I was gonna
Because
say this is a spiritually very Jen band, like very much. So probably not an issue for you.
And it really helps that this album kicks into gear with Chance Encounters and very quickly gives a very succinct portrait of what kind of aesthetic that this album is going to have, which is that it's got all these really punky screams and shouts, but with the building blocks of Heartland rock underneath it. It's got the punk flourishes of a band that's clearly more indebted to acts like Springsteen and other Heartland rockers that serve as his contemporaries. Hell, there's a song on this that sounds exactly like Dancing in the Dark,
Mm,
and there's a direct reference to Dancing in the Dark on another one of the songs. So you kind of know what you're getting when you go into something like this. And so I know that like you are already a huge fan of this band, and I kind of figured that this was getting to a point where it's kind of inimitable from the rest of the band's discography, which I can understand. But for me, as somebody that's getting into them for the first time, I'm really just appreciating how good the fundamentals are on a lot of this.
hmm
Just because, just like all across this album, really bright production, really strong hooks, great vocal performances from the lead singer. Like so many of the baseline aesthetic needs that I have for an album like this to work on me have been met. And I have a lot of fondness for the last Modest Mouse album and a lot of
hmm
Midwest emo stuff, which makes me a sucker for what I can only describe as like bar punk, which this album fully is.
Congratulations,
And
Menzingers are the bar punk band.
and like I don't think you guys can understand, but if you're from a certain part of the Midwest or from the South, like bar punk to me, by me saying it that way, implies a completely different kind of music
Hmm.
than like any other genre of punk or heartland rock. To me,
Yes.
bar punk is a very specific type of music that goes back to like the Joyce Manor album that we reviewed, even though I didn't like that album very much. It's kind of the
Yeah.
platonic ideal of what I've been talking about. And Hot Mulligan to me is a very bar
Yes.
punk band. And I
Spanish love
love,
songs.
yes, Spanish love songs as well. I love my bar punk bands.
Oh yeah.
I that's how I got into local music, was like following around my friends who were becoming bar punk rockers. Uh, and so this was right up my alley. And the real peak of this album for me, the one that was like, oh man, I love this band now, was the song Romanticism.
Yes. 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 Yes.
I love this chorus. I love the vocal melodies on the verses. And there's a moment on this, and I swear it might be my favorite like 2 seconds of music so far this year, where he's just screaming at the top of his lungs, "Bye so goddamn fast." That's
Yeah.
the kind of moment that if you can make that hit, that's a staple of your career
Hmm.
forever. And I fully buy into this being a like peak moment for this band. Where this album loses me a little bit is in its quieter moments, like Other People's Money and The
Hmm.
Fool, where it doesn't have as much melancholy or like groove as songs like Gasoline and Matches. I
Yeah.
really just want these songs to stick, and they don't
Hmm.
always, but when they do, when the band is on, they're really on. And the best thing I can say for this album is that it starts strong and it ends strong,
Hmm.
because I think my favorite song on this album is actually the last one.
Ooh.
I
Okay.
really love Everything I Ever Saw. As a closing track, it's kind of
Yeah. Instrumentally.
theoretically
Mm.
just perfect for the, big closer on an anthemic Heartland rock song. Everything I Ever Saw gives you everything you want. And that sentiment of the like, I don't want to relive, I just want to remember. And this that perfectly delivered vocal line. Like, I think this is one of my favorite, just in terms of pure vocal strength. This is one of my
Mm.
favorite albums of the year. I love the singing all across this, in its groovier new wave moments and in its harsher, punkier moments. This is note for note perfect singing. Like, there's not a single moment where I would complain about how the vocals on this album are
Greg
treated.
Barnett and Tom May are two of my absolute favorite pop punk vocalists because one of them does the incredibly smooth, poppier kind of Billy Joe Armstrong style kind of vocal like melodies, but also has the bite. And then you have Tom who just kind of sounds like a walking rasp of a man. And it just like whenever they need that extra grit, they bring in him, and it's like, ooh, yes, abso-fucking-lutely, it kills. Love the dynamism there.
And I liked this album's consistency in its themes of getting older and needing to get right with yourself, and occasionally needing to stop that to maybe help somebody else get right with themselves before they do something stupid. Like on Gasoline and Matches, and that theme is even revisited on Breathe With Me, which I loved that song as a kind of complement to that, one that's more anthemic and one that's more inviting to this kind of participatory element of, the live music. I would love to hear this album live. Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
Uh,
Morgan's gone to a few Menzingers concerts, and every single time it seems like a life-changing event.
and in a week of albums where I feel like I'm needing to dig for the meat, I
Hmm.
appreciate that this is an album that has its heart on its sleeve.
Yeah.
That's been a refreshing thing of our rotation these past couple of weeks for this show, is to hear an album that just feels so deeply and
Hmm.
is so focused. Because a not necessarily a frustration that I had with the Modest Mouse album, but something that I certainly could see people call it lacking in, or moments of real topical focus, because that
Hmm.
Modest Mouse album gets away from itself in
Oh
its
yeah.
more progressive moments, but this stays really honed in on trying to communicate really specific emotional ideas, even in its most downbeat songs, that I think people can really latch on to. And I found myself really latching on to, even when I found the compositions lacking. I found the well-worn sentiments of it charming, and you're gonna get a lot of mileage out of me that way.
Yeah, I'm glad that you enjoyed this. And honestly, like, even though you shouldn't start here, if like anything on this album is just like, ah, yes, I get this, I want more of this, you are not going to get better than the three album run of On the Impossible Past, World, and After the Party. Jen, you specifically, you're gonna be an after the party motherfucker. I can
Oh
just
boy.
tell. That's their album of like the first one where they start to age a little bit, like when they're not just young men anymore and they're a little bit more reflective, and they balance that knife's edge with some perfect song conceits. I may have listened to the song Bad Catholics 1,400 times. So yeah, I'm a little bit invested in this band, unless you might, in case you couldn't tell. But recommendation from me. This is again, I don't really think this is one of the band's best, and I think this album's pretty great. So that just tells you that if you haven't listened to the Menzingers, what are you doing? What are you doing? On the Impossible Past is like 40 minutes. Do you, go. What are you still doing here? Get out of here. Don't
Don't say
actually.
that yet. We got two more
Yeah,
albums
we
to
got two
go.
more albums to talk about, and one of them is by Mr. Steve Lacey, who, man, what a strange career Steve Lacey has had. Because, again, earlier, as I implied, dude kind of started off as an Odd Future affiliate and then really seemed to know the right people as he started kind of appearing as a sort of behind the scenes, both guitarist and producer. And he's just generally speaking kind of a guitar wunderkind who's really, really fucking talented. And he's been like playing on different people's albums. He's been doing production work, but he really, really became notable with his song Bad Habits when that came out, which I came to a little bit too late. I think I didn't discover that song until like 2023 or 2024, but that's been in my like permanent pop rotation playlist because like
Masterpiece.
it's like what Todd in the Shadows kind of said about it was just like I don't know what genre this song is and I don't think it matters either because everything about it works. It's hip hop, it's slacker rock, it's R&B, it's pop, it's all of these things and none of these things and that's why it works. He's got this
It's a real teenage dirtbag for the Odd Future era.
woo, ooh, that's good. That's a good byline. I wish we were real journalists so that I could put that somewhere. I like that one. But
Maybe I'll write a
even
piece about that on its own. I don't know.
yeah, go, honestly, get on your Substack. But on that album that Bad Habits came from, Gemini writes, that was like an unexpectedly really solid record. Not exactly something that, puts him in the upper echelons of pop musicians. It's kind of a mess, but it is a fascinating mess of a record, which is why I was actually kind of looking forward to Oh Yeah, because, once an artist knows what people want from them, that's when they can start to really focus and hone who they are and what they want to do. And Oh Yeah is honestly like every bit as messy of an album as Gemini writes, but I think its priorities are just squarely organized a little bit better. Steve Lacey is a guy who does one thing well above all else: personality. This guy has untapped charisma that is just oozing out of his pores on this thing. Like, he is such a funny, but also deeply felt and earnest writer that I couldn't help but get on board with the fact that lyrically, this feels like a really, really sexually inclined Midwest emo album. And once I got onto it with that level,
Ooh.
something about this just really started to hit because he's got songs on here like the dual Nice Shoes in Your World, which is just like this psych rock pop split structure fucking I don't even know what the hell. And it's amazing. Like, there's nothing, you're not going to hear anything this year that sounds anything like this song or a song like the other album highlight to me, which is The Feeling.
Oh,
This
yes.
guy just has it. I can't explain it any other way other than like This is what happened to me when I first listened to Flower Boy, and I was like, oh, okay, I get what makes this guy so unique and interesting and cool. This album kinda has that. It's audacious, it's colorful, it's ridiculous in many ways. I think a lot of the writing on here would just really fumble in lesser hands, but with his steadfast, confident delivery, he somehow makes an album where sucking on some titties is a song hook. And it works somehow.
There's there's such a recurring theme on this album of like helpless longing and being unable to communicate that. Like there's so many moments on this where he's just like, I can't tell you how I actually feel, so I got to write a song about it, and then I'm gonna write more songs about that. Like,
To quote Sufjan Stevens, words are futile devices. And that's what
and
this album's about.
The Feeling is the moment where it clicked for me because that's a song that's going for big melancholy theatrics.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
very George Michael. And
Yes.
this whole album is very George Michael.
Wow. Yeah, it is.
And with that comes this little undercurrent. The thing that makes this album its most interesting is, well, it's actually something that SZA says that I'll use to articulate what I mean here. Can I get ugly
Hmm.
next to you?
Oh, I love that. Love that.
That she says that, and I'm like, oh, I get it. I get it now. Because there's so many moments on this album where you see Steve Lacey just like begging to be understood while also being like horrendously impatient and a little bit of a creep about it.
A little bit, a little bit.
And being able to ride that line to make really good theatrics makes this to be a really unique neo psychedelic portrait of this songwriter who's out here looking for love at all costs. Because like my favorite moment on this whole album is this ain't gonna heal if we don't make a deal. This is on The Feeling. Why
Hmm.
the fuck you gotta test my patience? The delivery on that. We talk about when singers are good actors a lot.
Yeah.
This is a peak example of that. Why the fuck you gotta test my patience? I could spend my whole life waiting. The way
Hmm.
that line arrives with this thick bass and this sweet, serene chorus with this beautiful refrain is "Am I your baby?" Like that's been the
Am
earworm
I
out
your
of all these albums.
baby?
That's been the one that stuck with me the
So
most, even more than David Cronenberg telling me that I'm gonna die one day. Uh, and my real in on this album is the big, lush psychedelics all
Oh God.
across it on songs like Pure Color and Show You Me.
Mm.
And that's mixed with some very bedroomy, garagey, pop and rock fusions on songs like Doom. I
Hmm.
love this track so much. But I kind of have an issue with this. And my big want for this album to be a little bit more substantial, I think, comes from a lot of the thematic core of a lot of these songs coming from the same emotional place.
Hmm.
And so at some point, I start realizing that I'm hearing less intricate and less complex, but still worthy iterations of kind of the same idea, and that becomes disappointing after a
Hmm.
while. And some of these songs just don't contribute as much to this singular emotional space that the whole album is coming from as others do, which can make some moments, especially in the second half, feel a
Yeah.
little bit more interminable.
Especially in the kind of back portion of the record for me, that's where we do have some
Yeah,
songs that have some limited mileage with me personally.
the album kind of peters out and has a soft landing, even with how audacious structurally Nice Shoes and In Your World is. I feel like the parts of it aren't as gradual as they could be
Hmm.
in a way that can maybe create something more stark. I think I'm moving a little bit too fast between different ideas on this song. Like, I love different parts of it, but I don't think they all work as well together as they could if there was a little bit more focus or if there was a little bit more detail. Because by the time we get to the end of In Your World, I'm not getting as much out of the lyrics on this
Hmm.
as I am on other moments on this album that can be really revelatory for its overall concept that it's trying to deliver. And some of the big swings aesthetically in the latter half don't serve the thematic purpose of it as well as some of the more straightforward parts of it
Hmm.
do, which is disappointing. I
No,
do
I
still really like
I get
this
it.
album, but there are moments where it gets away from me a little bit.
I think this album is kind of direct, like your affinity for it is going to be directly proportional to how much you are willing to embrace mess. Because don't get me wrong, I really like this album. It is unquestionably a mess. And for like a bedroom pop sort of neo psychedelic album like this, I kind of want that on some level, but I do agree with you in that there is an art to maintaining the equilibrium of a mess. You still have to balance out your track list in a way that feels like it's not, obviously front loading or back loading its best or worst ideas into a specific part of it. And I don't quite think that that's the case here, but there are songs on here like Nothing, for instance, which don't quite contribute to the overall flow. And then I mean like you have Nothing and BB, which I think are the two like least substantial moments on the album for me, and they sandwich two of the most fascinating ones to me, which are Nice Shoes and Love Sex Drug Bomb, which is also just kind of another beautiful car crash of a musical idea that I, against my better judgment, really fucking love. And I guess another complaint I'll lobby at this is that the Cecile Believe feature, which I was looking forward to because notably Cecile Believe was an artist who worked a lot with Sophie and featured heavily on some songs on Oil of Every Pearls on Insides. This, like, the features on here, it's like, oh, SZA, Erica Badu, and Cecile Believe. Wow, that's okay. And I only really care for the Cecile Believe feature. Like, SZA's good on here, but her placement within the song is kind of curiously muted. And I'm like, if you get SZA, I don't really see the point in doing that. And Erica Badu is kind of the same. Like, it's a little bit like, oh, you're here. I love you, but I'm actually a little bit more into Steve's part in this song, actually. And like, that's not imperative, but it shows you that, Steve maybe still has a little bit of a ways to go into finding his footing as an artist because I still think that you can have this kind of roughshod punky appeal that he does definitely have without sacrificing making himself too kempt, too sanded off, without being this jagged of an experience. I'm able to give myself over to it really easily just because I like this is one of my favorite sounding albums of the year, but that doesn't necessarily mean that those sounds are shaped and formed in a way that is conducive to an album experience. It feels like Steve is really, really great at making songs and moments, maybe not quite a full album yet, but he's close. He's not that far away. But maybe if he's able to rein in his writing just a little bit, to focus where focus is not going to hold him back, just because he doesn't strike me as an artist who takes himself that seriously, but simultaneously does not excuse that as an like use that as an excuse to try less. Which is why this is so compelling because this is a deeply try hard album. Like it made me think several times, like lyrically and even the construction of some of the songs. It actually made me think of, I guess, what would probably be my favorite bedroom pop album, which would be Sydney Gish's No Dogs Allowed, which is it's kind of like an Odd Future take on that. It's weirder and way more ambitious and strange, but like that's kind of how it sounds, and that's the appeal of it is that you have a central performer who is a bit too wrapped up in themselves to sound as traditionally compelling as most vocalists might, and I find that compelling. He is one of the best working artists at knowing how to harness his own limitations. Like listen to Bad Habits, for instance. He's not singing well. That's not a vocal performance that you hear and go, oh, yeah, he sounds really like. No, he's singing because that's a melody everyone can sing no matter how good of a singer you are. It's very smart. And he's very smart on here. I just can't wait for him to get a little bit smarter.
With all that said, I do still recommend this album. I very much enjoyed it.
Highly. You will not hear anything else like it this year. And I think that that is, in and of itself, rather worth it. And speaking of things you probably won't hear anything like this year,
Man, this was a surprise.
Loathe. This is a band I have been dying to talk about because they released a record in 2020, their sophomore album, I Let It In, and it took everything. And this metal crossover album, which metal crossover albums are just not successful anymore, just not a thing that really happens. Against all odds, this did. And when I took a listen to it, I was like, you're telling me that somebody took Deftones and made them more electronic, more industrial, nastier sounding, and heavier? And nobody fucking bothered to tell me? And that's, yeah, those I Let It In and It Took Everything is a declaration of purpose, of taking a sound and aesthetic in alternative metal that only a brave few attempt and taking it to the moon and back. It's a great record. And I actually also really love their follow-up album, The Things They Believe, which is an ambient electronic post-rock album with no lyrics. What even is this fucking band, man? And so I was like, okay, this is clearly an intermittent release. This is not like their third album. This, on the other hand, this new record from the band, A Stranger to You, this is their more proper third record. And throwing this on, I think it's notable when an album basically like an album specifically of the heavier variety comes out and it manages to sound like something I personally have never heard before because the way this album mixes the percussion and drums, dude, what the blue holy fuck is going on these songs? Block of Flats is like these are concentrated concrete blocks of electronic noise hitting you in the face at full fucking force, mixed in with this breakdown that is absolutely filthy. Not to mention the vocal presence of the lead singer of this band is so deep and gorgeous sounding. I mean, I'm reminded of vocalists like Future Islands lead singer. I'm reminded of vocalists like Zealand Ardor's lead singer, some of my favorite metal and heavy music vocalists out there, frankly. And this whole album is aesthetically just absolutely cranked to 11. These songs are jagged, staticky, heavy, blocky, compressed, and they will beat the fuck out of you. And then they'll also just go back and sound like this miasma of psychedelic noise that is so well layered and so gorgeous. And I am just in love with the aesthetic of this fucking album, man. It's awesome. So you had even less of a precedence for this, you're telling me?
So I truly was unprepared for the way that this album was going to sound.
Mm.
It's so rare that something like this immediately catches me off guard and wins me over so quickly.
Oh yeah.
Because the way that this album mixes these really tightly constructed metal loops with these gorgeous, shoegazy, dreamy melodies. I've had a feast with this album.
Yeah.
This is very Jen. So Block of Flats. Oh man. Starts out with this incredible shoegaze styling until it explodes into this breakdown of fuzzy bass, but really like clear and clean drum lines that creates this discordant element between these two sounds that I find so interesting to listen to because the album is often going back and forth between dream pop, shoegaze, metalcore style vocal melodies that are slower in meter and then really hyping itself up with these really fast breakdowns.
Oh
And
yeah.
that's a rhythm that can be really fun to lose yourself in. And Block of Flats is this really ambitious, shifting, moving, dynamic piece that I just immediately was endeared to. The drum fills on the second half of this song completely threw me away. I was not prepared.
I mean, like this band gets straight up like there are parts of this where I was just like, damn, this is like some mathcore gent shit, which is just not something that metal bands like this often tend to attempt. It is a musically speaking, this album is constantly oscillating between plaintive, twinkly, pretty, just some of the most flatly gorgeous sounding electronic atmospherics I've heard in anything all year, and some of the most willfully ugly sounding metal I've ever heard. It's actually kind of insane how like staticky and gross sometimes this album is willing to sound. And like if you just boiled it down to its sound, I would breathlessly say it's just like, hey, what does Jake look for in music? Like, what is my ideal aesthetic of the way I think that sound appeals to me in the most hindbrain, animal instinct kind of way? And it's this. Everything about this sounds perfect to me. And I love too that the dynamics in the mixing is so key because this album, like, it will be so quiet, so quiet, and then immediately segue into something that is absolutely filling out the mix, like blowing, like it sounds at times like this is mixed by the Flaming Lips. It's so like fuzzy and overwhelming and insane sounding. And honestly, love that shit. Love it immensely. Then there's also the plethora of features on this, which I had no clue about going into, but every single time somebody shows up to add a little bit of extra dynamism to all of this, it really works just because the sound here is the blanket that contains everything else. And when you have somebody like Monster Brown coming on The Way It Breaks, or Jordan Rakei on The Ladder, which is God fuck these mixtures, this chemistry, it's so perfect. You almost don't even notice that there is a feature on here. It's crazy. Like Block of Flats too. Like it is something that is so aesthetically within line with itself that you wouldn't really anticipate it to be something that they're like, they're growing their sound on this album, which I would definitely argue that they are. This is a less pretty version of the sound that they were doing before, but I'm into it, especially when you consider that this album it's kind of a metal breakup album. It's kind of constantly talking about the strange disparity you feel when disconnected from somebody, but also the kind of there's a sense of the writing on here which is longing in a very particular kind of way. And it's not, oh, I miss this person or, oh, I'm sad because this person is gone. It's way more, I don't understand why this person didn't love me more. And that's such a really specific angle in order to attack something from that I find way more wrinkled and interesting when you do something like this because that's the kind of subject matter that's on all kinds of like Deftones albums and stuff. And the Dillinger Escape Plan is another band that this band clearly take a lot of notes from in terms of the sheer chaos and the subject matter that they write about. And they're able to do it in a way that, like, I've been hearing albums that sound kind of like this talk about things like this for as long as I've been listening to music. But never once was I ever on here and like, yeah, I kind of feel like this is a bit old hat, or I kind of feel like this is them on well-trodden ground that doesn't really feel as, investing as the music itself does. But no, the performances on here are so passionate and so well integrated into the pockets of these mixes. I don't know how this album was produced. I don't know how they did it because this should sound like such a mess. This should sound like something that's impossible to pull off. And yet they did it because I don't even know, like the credited people who did like the engineering and the mixing on this, they don't have like any other production credits. I don't know what they've done. And frankly, uh, can you do more? Can I call you? Fuck.
More of this, please.
Yes.
I want to talk about some of my favorite moments in this album. One of which is Revenant, which is where I really
Oh.
started to get with this album's lyrical concepts about, ambition and death and rebirth and, looking up to this whole element of like looking up to the sky as this kind of recurring image that alludes to different ideas, having your head in the clouds, but also letting ambition be the thing that lets you have strength and channeling that ambition into breaking down and building back up the self.
Mhm.
And I love the breakdowns on this song. Like I think Revenant might. Ooh, no, 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 no. Let me get to that. Let me get to that. Let me get to that.
Mm.
And then we'll get to Fangs. I love how spooky this song is.
Yeah.
Love the vocals on the chorus. I was really surprised by the song The Ladder, which gets starts out really stripped back, doing
Love the
like
ladder.
straight up dream pop stuff with a lot of heavily manipulated acoustic guitar. Sounds gorgeous. Another big swing that this album takes, it just makes me more endeared to it. And then Gifted Every Strength,
Mm.
the kind of magnum opus of this. It's 8 minutes long, but it goes back to being something sludgier and louder and
Much.
bigger, and has my favorite moment on this was just the guy screaming, "Kiss the sky!"
Oh,
And
yeah.
then is still able to play really well the back and forth between the gent and the sludge and the punkier influences on this, but moving back and forth between that and these dreamier vocals and melodies with these big group vocal harmonies, and insisting this need to kind of stop waiting for this thing that's never gonna come and you just have to go look for something else. And
Yeah.
there's a really bizarre choice, but one that really resonated with me. They sample some dialogue from Atlanta on this.
Yeah.
And it's Donald Glover's character talking about like, I'm just gonna be a loser forever. But this album is about not being that, get
No.
over the instinct to be a loser forever. And then I love the idea that's communicated on No Stranger to You of shedding your fears, but not letting your guard down, which I feel like is a really complex emotional space to try to work out for yourself. And again, love the sound of this. This whole album, from a production standpoint, is unlike anything you're going to hear this year. And its mix of shoegaze and metal is just beautifully unique.
Oh, yeah.
And it's really stuck with me this week.
I agree. And I think that a lot of it is easy to let some of the writing kind of fade into the margins with something this sonically fucking dense and overwhelming. But at the end of the day, what the album ends up kind of being about in a kind of grand unifying thesis way is that it's using ambition and your artistic drive to become a better individual person to grow away from things like heartbreak, to grow away from those more adolescent inclinations that hold you back. And I find that like just deeply moving, honestly. It's just like taking what you know and using that to pursue the best version of yourself. Like you're not making any concessions, you're not, holding yourself back from anything. You're still pursuing your dreams, but like the lyrics here are so thoughtful that they always feel like they're realistic. They're achievable. It's advice more than it is like actual like, oh, I'm going to do this thing and then I'm going to be a better person. It's more like, no, I'm able to do this because of what I have learned, and like it's more practical and less flowery. And I feel like that might be weird for some people, but like I find the bluntness of it to be really refreshing. And also like if you were a bit too esoteric with your lyricism on something like this, I would probably just become completely untethered from it altogether. Just because again, it's so fucking like that I would just kind of be like, it's a lot to process, man. But like, no, the writing on here I do feel like is concise and sharp. And honestly, that's the album in general. It's sharp. It has a deliberate intentionality to every single one of its moments, and it feels like every song contains a moment, like where it's just like, oh, this is the moment where they were just like, oh, we're gonna upend your expectations a little bit right now here. And as somebody who listens to a lot of music, I appreciate when bands are willing to do that without also throwing out the baby with the bathwater and just being like, oh, here's a bunch of fucking bullshit. This is not that. To me, continues their streak of excellent records, and I mean, I just hope that it doesn't take this long again for us to get to hear from them again. But like, this is a very expensive sounding album, so it wouldn't shock me if we, took another 5 years to hear another Loathe album. But just go listen to it, honestly. Like, really, if you're at all a metalhead, hell, if you like dream pop, maybe this will be the thing that gets you into metal. It really
Yeah,
could
if
be.
you're, I'm trying to think of like what some dream pop stuff that we've listened to this year could be a good like comp for something like
Honest to
this.
God, there are multiple times on here where when it's doing the more explicit dream pop and shoegaze stuff, where the guitar tones are just straight up, it's just like this is Cocteau Twins. This is just like 80s like psychedelic post-punk, and it sounds amazing. Like those watery ass guitar tones. I mean, it sounds like The Cure sometimes, for fuck's sake. Like this album has sonic overlap with the Olivia Rodrigo album that came out this year. What? How did? That's a compliment, by the way. That is not a complaint. But yes,
Yeah,
like
if you like the Olivia Rodrigo album, go listen to this. If you liked the Steve Lacy album, you'll probably enjoy this too, to
if
be
you just
honest with
want
you.
something that fucks you up a little bit, go listen to this album. It's very special. If nothing else, I think that this is going to be something that converts a lot of people who maybe missed the last couple of releases from the band and then makes them go, oh, I have been missing out. Holy shit. So, enthusiastic recommend for me. This is one of the metal albums of the year so far. And frankly, I'm nowhere near done with this.
All right, great. Big thumbs up for Loathe from the both of us. If you would like to support the show, and please do, because the algorithm is going to attempt to rot away what little is left of us from taking a week off. Like, comment, subscribe. If you would like to really support the show, join our YouTube member page where you can connect with us in our fan Discord. You can follow us on Blue Sky if you want to keep up with us over there. I've put the link to that in the channel profile, so it's easier to find. Um, and as always,
Rock over London. Rock on Chicago. Budweiser. King of beers. No, it's not. No. I'm gonna drink a fucking Budweiser. Are you kidding me? Get out of here.